Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Build the Finance Department of the Future. Today's webinar is brought to you by CFO Daily News, and it's sponsored by Tipalti. Today, I'll be joined by Derek Chang, Head of Community for Tipalti. My name is Mark Brousseau, President of Brousseau and Associates. I'll be your presenter for today's webinar. Throughout the webinar, Derek and I encourage you to ask questions. Use the Q&A tool on your screen to submit them to us, and we'll answer your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. So finance has undergone big changes over the past 2 years. There's no news there, but those changes probably can't compare to what we believe lies ahead. From payroll to payables to expense management and group consolidation, a wave of automation is coming that Derek and I believe will fundamentally change the way that finance departments operate. Manual tasks and siloed operations, well, we think they're going to be replaced by digital, hyper-connected systems and processes that evolve finance into the strategic heart of your enterprise. During today's webinar, we're going to show you how your finance team can avoid being left behind and start on its way to building the finance office of the future. Finance professionals can do so much more than back office number crunching, but that's only true if you let them. A capable CFO and finance team can keep your business moving forward and meeting its goals through functions such as ideating on how to grow the business, on balancing risk management, and delivering deeper financial insights to optimize the way your C-suite makes its decisions. If you want proof of all that, consider the way that the role of CFOs are changing. 81% of CFOs see identifying and targeting areas of new value as one of their primary responsibilities. It's no longer enough to tell the business what happened. The business wants to know what will happen. What's the impact of opening this factory, of making this change, of adding this product line? What's more, 77% of CFOs believe it's within their duties to drive business-wide operational transformation. And if you're looking for an example of that, look no further than the so-called digital transformation initiatives at most businesses. It might surprise you to learn that in more than 3/4 of businesses, it's the CFO who's leading the digital transformation initiatives, not a CTO and not a CIO. That shows you just how important it is for CFOs to be involved in digital transformation initiatives. Today's CFOs are expected to go far beyond traditional accounting responsibilities. The business is looking for them to help drive the company's direction. Consider this. A typical CFO might be responsible for things like improving timely business performance visibility, not just keeping costs in check, but understanding how the entire business is functioning. Conducting business analysis, these top-down reviews to find opportunities to re-engineer processes and make things work better. For forecasting cash and understanding the implications of different strategic business decisions. And of course, things like investment decision making and fundraising strategies, but it's so much more than that for today's business. In other words, CFOs and other employees in the finance department, well, they've moved well beyond those traditional roles that we typically associate a CFO or a controller or a director of finance with, and they're becoming value creators in their own right. And this is true across the finance department. And digitization in finance, well, it's allowing for opportunities for CFOs and controllers and such to do just this. In fact, finance professionals treated as value drivers instead of those financial stewards that we've always thought of them as, well, they're more likely to exceed their performance goals. That's right. When we arm finance professionals with the tools to help do these things to become value drivers, well, they're not only going to do that, they're going to also accomplish everything we expected in the past as well. But when to succeed in these more strategic positions, it's important that finance players have the time, the resources, and more than anything else, the skills to elevate their positions out of basic stewardship. Now, you might be asking yourself, does training our finance team honestly make a difference in terms of our business growth and our ability to achieve our strategic objectives? Well, McKinsey research proves that it does. And you know what? It has a greater impact than technological transformation strategies all by themselves. McKinsey surveyed companies most often reported a significant impact on increasing revenue streams and reducing costs. And businesses have done that by focusing on attracting, retaining, and upskilling their talent and creating a culture where they've got digital and engineering upskilling going on. So, in other words, these businesses that are growing fast have put these processes in place to be able to cultivate this environment where our finance staff is able to use the strategic tools we want them to. But you know what? Upskilling also helps improve your company's competitive position. That's right. It can help you get an edge on the competition. And the more you invest in upskilling your team, the bigger the results you're likely to achieve. McKinsey's study took a look at companies that were investing in digitization efforts. And what they found is when you make modest investments in digitization, well, you're going to get modest results. But if you make a big investment in digitization and improving workflows and upskilling your staff, well, now you're going to get bigger results. You're going to be able to more effectively scale your operations. This is one of those areas where you get what you pay for. And the good news is that when it comes to all this upskilling, your finance team's already on board, right? They want to find new ways of working and new ways of being able to deliver to the business. Nearly 4 out of every 10 employees told Gartner that finance digital transformation benefited their role in the company. But you can't expect to harness the benefits of these data-driven technology without equipping your employees with the skills they need to digest data and to generate actionable insights. They need tools. And that's where the digital transformation journey comes in. This is where we're starting to build our finance department of the future. Instead of being siloed and only fulfilling statutory requirements, today's CFOs are leveraging automation, digital transformation wherever possible so that their finance function can evolve into this strategic heart of the operation that I'm talking about. Consider payroll, right? This is a critical finance task. After all, employees are one of the most important assets within any business. So it's essential that we keep them happy and we're paying them accurately and we're paying them on time, especially in today's labor market. But with that said, payroll is one of those finance functions that it's pretty easy to get wrong. Employee information might be out of date. You might have tax codes that are inaccurate. And there's also added pressure due to increased time sensitivity and tight deadlines each month. So not only do you need to get it right, you need to get it right fast. So finance departments are taking a hard look at the way it is that they operate their payroll systems. In many cases, payroll systems aren't well connected, meaning we've got our finance teams having to manually key in or export data to core accounting software and banking providers. In the future, we want to create an environment where data is real time, where systems are well connected, and we're able to access all of the information we need to ensure that we're paying our teams accurately and on time. Many payroll processes can now be automated to do just that. And the way that organizations are doing it is by connecting accounting software and banking providers to provide an all-in-one workflow, if you will. And this saves time. It reduces the chance of human errors. It overcomes the need to move data into different systems. either manually or by exporting and importing all these CSV files that we deal with. And a particular benefit of automating your payroll process with an all-in-one workflow, well, it's not having to recreate payroll journals. And that, of course, is one of those notoriously complex tasks. Accounts payable is another critical and regular task for finance teams. And ordinarily it's completed once a week or so, but it takes up a lot of time from our finance teams. We've got to collect our invoices. We've got to manually enter payment data and details into bank websites, and we've got to attain the necessary approvals for payment. Well, this is another area where we can digitize and create a more strategic environment. On-demand, self-service supplier portals, what they do is they accelerate supplier onboarding, they mitigate payment errors, and they improve communications with suppliers. What happens is all the information we need on a supplier and their banking details and even their documents is collected in a self-service online environment. So we no longer need to chase down all this information. And this also provides suppliers with the ability to check on the status of things. They can instantly see where things stand with their invoice and their payment and make any required changes. And all of this reduces supplier inquiry volumes. It also creates an environment where you're going to have stronger supplier relationships. Automation also makes it easier for AP departments to manage and reconcile their invoices. We all know that paper invoices are a big hassle in accounts payable. They cost a lot of money. They're frequently lost. There's lots of errors. It's hard to see where they are. And this is true if we're routing them via our business email accounts. Well, automation changes all this. It creates a digital end-to-end environment where things can flow seamlessly. Paper invoices get converted into an electronic format, and either through OCR data capture or by leveraging e-invoicing, we're able to extract all of the data from those invoices automatically. So no one has to key it, and there's less chance of errors. And when you've got an automated environment like this, far more invoices are going to be posted directly to your ERP or accounting system without anyone ever having to touch them. How's that? Well, in many cases, once we've got this data, we're going to be able to match it automatically against POs that are residing in your ERP. And when those invoices and POs match, well, we can post things automatically. And in cases where an exception occurs or where an invoice does require a review, say it's a high dollar transaction or a strategic supplier or maybe a new supplier, well, now you can use digital workflows to route invoices based on preset business rules. And automated accounts payable solutions reconcile all of this information in real time. This isn't all automation does. It also assists AP departments in tax and regulatory compliance. And this is a big concern for CFOs and other finance leaders, right? The technology is going to gather the right tax forms and tax informations from suppliers before you ever make the payment. So we're no longer trying to chase down suppliers to collect these documents after the fact. We know how agreeable that can be. The automation also ensures that payees provide the correct documents, and the technology can validate the forms and the information on them to ensure that they're accurate and that they're complete. Solutions can even calculate tax withholding automatically when that's applicable. One other thing that automation can do in AP is it could provide a single platform for multi-entity companies to do business globally. More and more of us have multi-subsidiary businesses. This has become the norm. And when you've got an AP automation solution, that's going to streamline those payments across borders with support for different payment methods and even currencies. The creation and approval of POs are another common pain point in our finance departments. Let's face it, there could be a disconnect between budget owners and our suppliers, and that can result in invoices being raised with incorrect or with fully utilized PO numbers. Using an automated PO tool helps streamline this process and avoid all those downstream headaches that we seem to have in our finance departments. POs can be created on the fly or from directly within a forecast. And what's more, finance departments can automatically match invoices to POs once they're received, as I was saying before, eliminating the risk of being assigned incorrectly, as well as all that manual processing. A number of core accounting software providers also have created a challenge for us by not including functionality to consolidate at a group level. Many finance teams are getting around this issue by exporting figures or for their individual companies into spreadsheets or by manually adjusting to consolidate group companies. But let's face it, this approach carries some pretty big risks, right? Data can be entered incorrectly, and that could delay the financial close. There's also the risk that unrealized foreign currency gains and losses in the balance sheet, as well as profit loss or revenue recognition treatment. Well, when you use core accounting software that has consolidation features, or you use a third-party consolidation package, that's going to help you ensure consistent treatment across all group companies, and that's going to save your finance employees the hassle of exporting and manipulating their account data. Expense management is another area where finance departments are taking a hard look at the way they're doing things. This has historically been a big chore for finance teams due to having to chase colleagues for the reports at month end, alongside having to track down all that sign off from managers and keying all that data in accounting. Now, I know expense management might not be front of mind for you when it comes to T&E, but there's lots of other expenses we need to keep track on. And as business travel continues to grow after the pandemic, this is going to become a bigger issue again. We have lots of cases where submitted reports are often disjointed. In lots of cases, we have receipts missing or spend being taken to the wrong accounting category. And all of that creates issues when it comes to VAT treatment. So one of the solutions organizations are looking at is automating this process with an automated expense management solution. They want to find ways to more accurately upload information and capture those receipts automatically, route them to the right manager, be able to make sure that they comply with our travel rules, be able to account for those spend categories automatically, and be able to flag any suspicious transactions. This allows us to free up a lot of our staff time, particularly when it comes to our knowledge workers as well as our finance teams. When you consider all this, when you consider all the hassles involved in so many of our finance functions, it's no wonder that more businesses have digitized their finance office since the start of the pandemic. McKinsey reports that 88% of CFOs and other finance execs have accelerated their use of automated systems over the past 2 years. And this really aligns, in my mind, with senior leaders' vision for the future of finance, right? They see a future where our finance function is digital, it's data-driven, and it's managed by smaller teams. Now, none of this is to say that every finance leader has embraced automation. There are 5 big reasons that some CFOs and some other financial execs continue to drag their feet when it comes to automation, all right? First, some finance leaders may worry whether people will ever use the new technology. And this is really, in my mind, a change management issue. Just because you've been doing something the same exact way for years and years, well, that doesn't mean it's the right way. And what's more, one of the things here is that our workplace is changing. So the fact is that the new workers coming into our offices probably have different expectations, and they're not wed to some of those old processes. It also can be difficult for finance leaders to comprehend the value for something that, quite frankly, they haven't experienced hands-on, right? Conceptually, the idea of paying for technology that does what a person can do, Well, that might seem unnecessary to some people, right? And particularly those who haven't come up the proverbial ranks. Well, automation eliminates the need to continually add, vet, and train frontline staff. And this is a big problem now. Today, 20% of all finance workers are looking for a job. And what you have to do is find ways to be able to manage this turnover as well as prepare for your company's growth without having to constantly be adding and vetting and training staff. You also have a case where some finance leaders are skeptical of the technology, right? And in their defense, some technology providers make promises that they can't always keep. So finance leaders can overcome this concern by taking time to understand whether a system or a technology is going to meet their needs. They want to drill down into the technology, understand its use case, understand its applicability in their operations. Some finance leaders also have an incomplete understanding of what technology is. And the fact is that, well, technology is always evolving. So we've got to keep up with it as finance leaders. And I think that this is less of a problem now that so many finance leaders are heading up our company's digital transformation efforts. And finally, some finance leaders, well, we frankly get distracted by our digital routine. We're busy with other priorities. We're busy trying to navigate this uncertain environment. The thing is the stakes are too high for us to be distracted. We've got to focus on automation. We've got to focus on building that office of the future. And I believe more CFOs understand the risks of failing to modernize their finance function. More than 70% of CFOs feel that their executive team's increasing demands could be pretty challenging if they don't address them with automation. And 33% of CFOs see a risk in the lack of automation or slow implementation of new financial technology. So they understand that they've got to automate. So here's the message we want to leave you with today. Finance professionals can do so much more than back office number crunching if you let them. But finance department workflows today, well, we're frankly bogged down when we're having to deal with manual inputs and transferring data sets. This is leaving our finance teams with lots and lots of low-level administrative tasks that take them away from some of the things we really want them focusing on. So uncovering finance automation opportunities could improve your finance team's efficiency and increase productivity without ever increasing your finance team's size. Just consider the accounts payable function in your company. 84% of the typical accounts payable practitioner's day is spent on heads down transaction processing. Things like keying invoice data, pushing around paper, and chasing down information and responding to endless calls and emails from suppliers about where things stand in the process. All the while, they've got to keep track of dozens and dozens of best practices, industry standards, auditor guidelines, and company rules for how it is that invoices should get processed and suppliers should get paid. And the process isn't even much better when it comes to AP managers. The typical AP manager spends more time each day on those manual repetitive tasks than the managerial tasks they were hired to perform. Things like hiring staff and upskilling staff. What's going on here? Well, today we're so bogged down with manual and semi-automated AP processes that we don't have time for the things that matter most. Things like analyzing data and collaborating with stakeholders and even building relationships with suppliers. So when we think about this finance office of the future, well, here's one area where we can lay down some roots, where we could start. And AP departments get it. They're starting to automate their AP function. 71% of all AP departments say they have plans to automate further. But what might surprise you to know is that 44% of AP leaders who describe their departments as being largely automated Well, they have plans to automate as well. And what these departments realize, these largely automated departments that are deploying more technology, they recognize that semi-automated isn't enough. What you need is you need a fully automated environment. This end-to-end digital environment that's data-driven and seamless, this is what you need to be able to compete in today's business world. And CFOs have proved this out through the benefits they're achieving with automation. When surveyed about what it is they were able to do as a result of automating their finance departments. CFOs said that they were able to eliminate 40% of the manual processing time. Think about what your finance team could do if you freed up 40% of their time. But not only that, we also found that 47% of CFOs were able to improve the experience that they were providing to their customers. Now, those customers might be internal and they might also be external. Look, every business today is looking for ways to strengthen relationships with suppliers and customers. And digital transforming our processes is one proven way to do it. Just look at this chart. What's more, 37% of CFOs said that they were able to reduce compliance risks as a result of automating their financial processes. This makes perfect sense when we think about the environment we're operating in today. Many finance teams are leaning heavily on emails to route finance documents to employees who might be working from home. Now, email was a workaround that made perfect sense when we were suddenly sent into a remote work environment. But for my money, it's a workaround that's no longer working. What we're finding is that in many cases, organizations are operating in a less secure environment, one where they don't have separation of duties. They don't have the ability to ensure chain of custody. They can't see the actions taken on a document. They don't know where a document stands in the process, and there's no stopping someone from deleting a document ahead of schedule. So when you automate a process and you create a digital environment where everything's controlled and tracked, well, now you're going to have a more compliant environment. We also find that organizations are adopting a more robust finance tech stack. Ask yourself, are your finance employees forced to work within legacy systems that may or may not be able to integrate with each other or even with other systems in your company? Now, if so, you want to free them from the constraints of older technology by installing some up-to-date alternatives. So what does that look like? Well, there's some real key attributes to look for in a modern finance tech stack. First, you want to ensure that prospective solutions have certain capabilities. So when you're talking to technology providers, there's a few things you want to ask them. And the most crucial consideration is whether the technology is accessible. Does it have a modern infrastructure? Is it available 24/7? Is it 100% cloud-based? Are there artificial intelligence and machine learning built into it? Does it have robust global capabilities? Let's face it, you're going to have employees all around the globe. And so you're going to need real-time visibility and you're going to need the ability to scale efficiently. It's also essential that you find solutions that integrate with solutions that you're currently using. For example, suppose you already have part of your finance stack established, like your ERP. Well, in that case, you can look within their ecosystem of partners to find suitable integrations that can solve your current issues. So you want to find solutions that integrate with whatever ERP you're using. By integration, I don't mean makes it easy to rekey the data. That perfect tech stack should also incorporate strong financial controls to help prevent fraud, tax, regulatory, as well as audit risks. You regularly evaluate financial processes so that can help you uncover potential vulnerabilities. And modern technology can also help you ensure strong controls. You want a solution with things like multi-factor authentication, IP restrictions, data protection and encryption, roles-based security and audit trails, as well as security and segregation of duties and redundancy, all those things you're not going to get from those emails that you might be using. You also want to consider implementing KPMG certified tax compliance and EU US Privacy Shield protection to help your organization avoid non-compliance penalties. And you want to find a way to automatically screen prospective vendors for OFAC as well as other sanctions so you can avoid doing business with bad actors. And that's a front page headline these days, but it doesn't have to be a burden on your team as well as something that hangs over your head. And that ultimate tech stack that you're looking at, well, it's also going to be a key to consider that it's not going to be a one size fits all approach to everything. It's going to vary depending on your business's maturity, its core strategic priorities, as well as your organization and business model's complexity. You also have to consider where your business aims to be in a year or two. These should be foundational technologies we're talking about when it comes to building this finance office of the future. These aren't things that you want to be replacing in a year or two. You don't want to have to change these processes every year either. So there's key things you want to look for in a future-proof solution. Can it scale? Is it using modern technology? Is it backed by a company that invests in technology and has a well-defined product roadmap? There's also other factors you might want to consider, like global expansion. Is your business looking to expand into new markets? Do you have a multi-subsidiary structure today? And if so, what challenges is that creating and what needs does it require in the tech stack you're looking at? You also want to consider your number of international suppliers when you're evaluating your tech stack. You want to make sure the solution is built for it and it's not some kind of workaround. Does it have a way to more easily make cross-border payments, for instance? You also want to be sure to focus your efforts on the most time-consuming finance functions. These are the kinds of things I was talking about earlier: payroll, accounts payable, expense management, group consolidation. In most of our companies, well, these are the things that deserve prioritization when improving our tech stack. These are the things we want to make sure we are focused on when we're talking to prospective vendors. It also doesn't pen us in, though. We want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a box when we're thinking about the applications that we want to automate. We want to find ways to integrate across our solution. So you want to ask yourself, what are your current problems in your business and what are you looking to rectify? And what is it you're looking to achieve over the long haul? If you answer these questions, this will give you some guidance when it comes to building out your ultimate tech stack. But the key thing here is you want a solution that's not only going to fix what you have currently, but it's going to fix potential problems in the future. You also want to find ways to elevate your finance team to becoming strategists. Part of expanding the role of your financial employees involves expanding their accessibility, their responsibility, as well as their authority. In addition to giving employees the time and the tools they need to upskill within the finance department workflow, you want to be ready to approach their roles differently. And to do that, that's where automation comes back in. And more CFOs recognize the limitations of manual processes. And that's why more finance teams are using digital tools to automate routine tasks and free up time for those strategic activities. Because once information is digitized and it's accessible, only now can your finance team use data to help organizations make more strategic and more informed decisions. That digitization also helps AP teams as well as other finance functions grow without having to hire additional staff. When you use automation in your finance function, It makes your processes less labor intensive. It accelerates them. But most importantly, it allows your finance teams to focus more time on strategic work like forecasting and cash controls. And this is key here, because if we're going to build this new finance function, we're going to need to do it with the involvement of our teams. And once you've done that, once you've automated your processes and you've freed up your finance staff, now they're going to have the opportunity to have a bigger impact on your organization. 62% of CFOs say that they will switch the focus of the employees that currently handle manual tasks that can be automated to higher value work. This is the biggest misperception about automation, that once we automate, it's all about eliminating staff. But the reality is much, much different. What CFOs really want to do is they want to free up staff for the things they were hired to do in the first place. Even in cases where a job is eliminated by automation, 77% of CFOs say they plan to transfer those workers to a different department. Now, none of this is to say that everyone can do any job without more training. And this goes back to one of the tenets of this webinar, upskilling. And CFOs get this, right? CFOs are looking to retrain workers with new skills and allowing them to circumvent the need to get rid of staff. We recognize that our staff is valuable. They're precious in today's environment. And so we're going to find ways to put them to good use elsewhere in the organization. I'll give you an example. If you or your CFO might be one of the 27% who told your company they expected to expand their global operations, then you're going to be looking for ways to free up staff. And this is going to be reasonable, these types of global expansions, when you have the ability to have your team be strategists, right? They're going to help you be able to understand, how do we go into these markets and how do we leverage our products there? And it really does come back down to this strategy, to using the data we have in our finance departments. We look at what it is organizations are doing with data today. Well, it's typical things like forecasting and budgeting and planning and cash flow analysis. But what could we be using our data for? Are there ways that we could leverage it to more impact our cash flow and our corporate spending? When we think about the role of our finance employees, well, this involves expanding them to becoming those strategists, to providing them with the data they need to be able to get at the information and help expand the business domestically as well as globally. So the message we want to give you today, when you're thinking about the future of finance, there's big challenges that lie ahead. Today, the role of the CFO and finance leaders is changing. They're expected to be a strategist, not just a financial steward. And to achieve those objectives, you're going to need better tools. You're going to need to arm your finance team with the skills and the technologies they need to support those strategic objectives. That's the goal of finance into the future, to build a role where it's digital, it's data-driven, and we can do more with less. You might be wondering how you could get started on this. Well, to tell us more, I'm going to hand it off to Derek. Derek?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for joining the CFO Daily News session. If you don't know who Topolti is, I'm really excited to introduce you to us. If you have heard of us, promise I'll try and keep it interesting. I really do love telling our story. We provide payables automation to over 2,000 companies. You probably recognize some of these logos. For example, if you have kids and you've survived the pandemic, congratulations. You probably heard of Roblox. We actually pay every game developer on that platform. Or maybe now that the pandemic is kind of over, you might have a loved one who's getting married. Maybe you're getting married. You might have heard of Zola. This is an e-commerce site for all things wedding related. our system actually processes tens of thousands of their invoices every month, and they have like one person doing that. If you've heard of WordPress, you might know that the company behind WordPress is called Automatic. They run 70% of all the world's websites, and we help them with a lot of their global needs. Why am I bringing this up? Well, these are not mom and pops. They're also not major enterprises with unending amounts of resources. These are fast-growing businesses, and they're looking to scale. So during the pandemic, a dozen or so of these companies actually went public, and we're really proud of to be part of that journey for them. But really, it was about executing those payables processes and moving forward. Next slide, please. So why do a lot of these companies choose Tipalti? I'm not going to go too deep into our technology here. You can kind of see it on the slide. If you're really interested, just let us know in the comments. We'll have somebody talk to you and contact you. But here's the CFO friendly elevator version of why our solution is fairly unique. We look at the entire payables process as a holistic flow from suppliers to approvers, compliance, banking rails. It's not just about that invoice. And it's not all about the payments either. It's really how you minimize operational impact to your finance team to get this very transactional, malign process done. And on top of that, we build in the kind of world-class tools you need to get global remittance done, to get FX done, to reconcile quicker, to get tax compliance working. We last year acquired a company that we built a purchase order management system around. So we look at it as a very holistic transactional process, because if we can eliminate a lot of the transactional side of things for you as an organization, that goes back to what Mark was talking about. It elevates the finance team, turns them more into strategic value add resources within the company. And so we do this at scale for not large companies, but growing companies. And this is the kind of architecture that we offer. A lot of it's based on global, but also a lot of it's based on scale. So we really look at it as a full bore approach to payables. So I'm going to offer you kind of a mental question. You know, as a CFO, do you have better things to worry about than AP? Does your team have more challenging work they need to be doing? Do you want to stop paying people to pay people? This is why companies bring in Tipalti. So thank you. Mark, back to you.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't already submitted your question for me and Derek, or if you've thought of an additional question, go ahead. Use the chat tool on your screen to submit them to us now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Derek, one of our attendees is wondering how you prioritize the automation of AP and payroll and some of the other applications I described with everything else going on in the enterprise these days?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, look at the world today. The world is changing. Supply chains are overextended, and they're going to want to do business with companies that have their act together. We just had a very recent study. If you go onto our site and look it up, we just announced a research report where we interviewed 500 senior finance managers, and nearly 22% said that they've had experiences where their supplier invoices were paid late. So imagine being a supplier on the other end. You probably are in some fashion dealing with a late payment. And in addition to that, look at the frustration around how the finance team is perceived within the organization. that same report, 2/3 admitted that they got feedback from internal folks that they had AP inefficiencies, and you want to be able to solve that. If there's a transactional process, that's a candidate for automation. And as a CFO, do you think finance should be just a pass-through process, or do you want to be a value-add organization? The financial operations of a company is essential to running the business, and not just the finance and accounting team. It doesn't just affect the finance and accounting team. This affects everyone in the organization, everyone in the company. And then right now we're in a digital age. The internal buyers for every department, they expect a responsive finance backbone to their operation. You can't run the business if they're having to deal with these inefficiencies and clawbacks on finance processes.
Derek, what's the biggest objection you hear from CFOs and other finance leaders when it comes to automation? I laid out some of the reasons that finance leaders haven't automated yet. What's the biggest stumbling block you see?
It varies. I think a lot of research, everybody's got a different reason. Sometimes it's cost, but then to that, it's like, well, what is the cost of the work you're doing manually? Look at that. Look at the inefficiencies there. Look at the return on investment. Most automation, honestly, even our competitors will tell you that automation payback is generally in the 8 to 10 times return on value. So we think ours is even more because of our ability to scale. But even if you do just the most basic automation, you're going to end up with a return because you're freeing up that resource. You are improving your accuracy. You're improving compliance. You're adding more auditable processes within the organization. And come end of month, end of quarter, reconciliation becomes an issue. If you can smooth that out, then that's more time to know like how you're doing as an organization, what's the next plan moving forward. So that cost is usually a factor. And then, the kind of belief that we have it handled. We've got Cheryl and Steve in the back room, and they're keying in all these invoices and cutting checks, and that's what they do all day. But when you look at how organizations are growing and where the next generation of finance and accounting folks are coming from, is that the kind of work that they want to do? And usually the answer is no. That is a pass-through process, and there's no value to it other than it got done. But those are also processes that software is much better capable of handling at scale as part of that.
Another attendee writes, does your organization have to be a certain size in order to cost justify accounts payable automation like you're describing?
Certainly you should look at your goals. Where are you in the scope of things? How you're growing? A lot of businesses are taking this opportunity as we go back into recovery mode to grow. There's probably more consolidation happening in our future. So, if you are on a growth trajectory, then you definitely need to consider some type of automation. And then on top of that, your competitors likely, we're going back to the supplier relationship. If you and your competitors share a supplier, what is the reality of that relationship? If that supplier has 500 widgets and you both ordered 500 widgets, who is that supplier going to work with? Probably the one who has their act together and can pay them, because the next 500 widgets aren't coming for several months. and now you're stuck. If you can't have a solid, grounded relationship with that supplier, if you are not paying on time, if you're not processing invoices on time, getting the approvals handled, that becomes a real problem for companies that want to get their jobs done. And that's, again, not just on finance, right? That's on the entire organization. It's like, I'm in marketing, and I know we are the biggest spenders in our organization because, Mark is expensive, guys. Um, uh,
Well,
but the need to go in and make things happen within an organization uh, with the fluidity and frictionless environment that's required, we're beholden to the finance team to help us do that and enable that. I think back to my parents when we would go and, oh, can I buy that telescope? I really want to, learn about astronomy. And they hold all the cards. They hold all the finances. I can't do it myself. I need
right.
to, engage. And the smoother that process is, and the more active the business can be. And ultimately, isn't that what every business wants?
We have two related questions here, Derek. The first is, tell me more about how your solution streamlines global operations. And the second
Yeah.
question is does your solution support cross-border payments?
Great question. Yes, both to both. We uniquely are able to handle multiple entities. I think we're one of the few that can do that at scale. And so just from that part of it, you're able to manage the payables operations for, your organization in the UK and the organization in Singapore. And so we are able to streamline all of that, whether they are cost entities or not. We support both. We have some, what I like to phrase as micro treasury functions. So the ability to convert and plant funding accounts in local currency so that you can streamline that process. So let's say you have a research center in Mexico, and that's all they do. They don't have a revenue source. We're able to help fund that directly in pesos. Is that the Mexican currency?
Mhm.
So we're able to do that directly, and it's a very smooth process in that sense. So you don't actually need active treasury folks, making decisions about how much it's gonna, what's the optimal day to convert our currency. It's like, well, it's a convenience factor. I just need to pay our people in Mexico. And that kind of stuff happens all the time on our platform, in addition to just kind of like the routine ability to read an invoice, know that it's in Australian dollars and not Canadian, and key that in directly into your ERP. It's and then pay the suppliers according to what they want. So maybe they want a check. Very few do, honestly. They prefer wire. So we have wire hookups, and we ask them. We ask the suppliers directly, how do you want to be paid? And we're able to remit in wire. We have quite a few local bank transfer drops, so like SEPA, and as well as what we term global ACH,
Mhm.
even though that's not really a thing. uh, there's no universal local bank transfer, but we're able to do that because of our relationships with our bank. We can pay in PayPal if that's your jam. We have a lot of digital economy companies who pay partners using PayPal. I mentioned one of the companies is Twitch, so Amazon Twitch. All those streamers the majority of them want to be paid in PayPal because it's convenient, and they don't have, honestly, the next generation of folks very unbanked. They look at PayPal and other platforms like that as a means. So we're able to do all that in addition to handling all the tax compliance involved with a global supplier. So onboarding them, getting their W-8s completed. That's all part of our process as well. In a way, it also improves their legitimacy. We do OFAC checks for every payment, but also the ability for us to capture some of that tax data ensures that at least at one level, we believe that they are a true entity. So you're not like at risk of sending payments to a money launderer, for example, because we're tracking all that for you. And then at the end of the year, compiling all this information, and then you can generate your 1099s and 1042Ss around that. And it's all kind of completed. It's a single process. And to be honest, a lot of our customers think of payables as kind of a part-time thing now. We use it internally. We've got a wonderful AP manager who runs our operation, but she spends half her time she spends on the areas that don't involve the invoices, payments and things. Most of the time she's just dealing with like credit card stuff and reconciling according to the ledger. Very little has to do with the actual invoice and payment. And so we look at it, we're starting to expand and grow, and we'll be adding more functionality just to support the entire payables process. But as far as like the pure invoice supplier relationship, that's our bread and butter, and we are excited to keep that up at a global level.
And that will be our final word. Thank you, Derek, for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join us. On behalf of Topalti and CFO Daily News, this is Mark Brousseau. Thanks everyone for joining us. Hope to speak
Thank
with you
you.
again soon.